Good morning. Welcome to Member Focus Monday. I'm Christina Schaefer, Social Media Manager for HAR. I'm joined this morning by Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo. Welcome.
Thank you, Christina, for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. We have a lot to talk about, so we'll get into it in just a second. But really quick, I did want to mention that today's Member Focus Monday and our podcast this week is sponsored by Energy Ogre. Energy Ogre is the only electricity referral that will show your clients you truly care. So thank you so much to Energy Ogre for sponsoring this week. Judge Hidalgo, thank you again so much for being here this morning. We're really excited to have you.
I'm thrilled to join you guys.
Absolutely. So you've been in your position about 9 months now, right?
That's right.
Has it kind of flown by?
Yes, it's going by very fast.
All right. So how does it feel to have been elected to to represent the third largest county in the United States? I mean, that has to be exciting, right?
Yes, it's a huge privilege. The first thing for viewers out there that may not be familiar, because, and I always feel like it's important to cover this, is my title is Harris County Judge, but of course it's not a judicial position.
Right.
It's an executive position that helps control the budget for Harris County. And so this fiscal year, our budget is just over $5 billion. We're the largest county in Texas and larger than 26 states, which means there's incredible opportunity for positive change. And that's what's been so exciting over the past 9 months is, we arrived with an agenda and with plans, and we've been able to make a lot of the positive changes we were aiming for, but also discovering just how much you can do. It's roads, bridges, flood control, the entire justice system, and an advocacy platform when you have such a big microphone that in the past has gone unused.
That's great. So that was actually my next question is what exactly does the judge do? But it sounds like you really have a hand in just about anything that Harris County is involved in, it seems like.
Yes, I mean, it's easy to say it's just infrastructure, right? So it's me and 4 commissioners who each have their commissioner precinct. And part of the work we are in charge of is making sure that the infrastructure is up to par. The new way we're looking at it is also having a vision. In the past, it's been planned sort of, year by year. And a place like Harris County that's growing so quickly, it's important to think about how we can be the most, the smartest, how we can most welcome growth and promote smart growth, make sure there's transit option, make sure there's trails, make sure we're attractive for people that want to move here. And so thinking holistically about not just by imaginary precinct lines, but altogether, how do we grow? We inherited, for example, a lawsuit that had been lodged against the county for years. A federal judge, a court of appeals, had said that our bail system was so discriminatory, it violated the Constitution of the United States. And so we've been working very hard. Just this past month, we were able to resolve that, settle the lawsuit, change the system, basically make sure that folks who are in jail are the folks who are a threat to the community, and that it's not, it used to be that if you were wealthy but you were a risk, you could just pay your way out. And if you were poor but you weren't a risk, you were forced to stay in jail or plead guilty just so that you could go home to your family. Basic things like a 311 system, right? If you have a pothole, live in unincorporated Harris County, who do you call? So we're setting up a 311 system. The census, I mean, there's just so much, but for us it's really been first resilience, flood resilience, and our ability to respond, criminal justice reform, because we were just in such a terrible place, and as we know, sort of death penalty capital of the world, incarceration capital of the world, and so there's a lot of reform to be done. And we're thinking a lot about transparency of systems. How do we budget in a way that is smart, that makes sure that we're good stewards of taxpayer money, making sure we have metrics, we have goals, and that we share that with the community, that county government's not some hidden force, but something that people can really feel. And with that comes expanding access to the vote, to the polling station.
Very good. So speaking of reform, we've heard a lot about gun reform in light of the recent mass shootings. Do you have any thoughts on that, or is there something as a county that we could be doing?
It's a terrible situation, and I think my heart's been heavy since the latest shooting. You know, we're all kind of walking around with this burden. I don't think that's the way things should be in America. I think it would be difficult for anyone to say that that's the way things should be in America. And so for one part, of course, it's advocating. We're not sitting quietly. We're saying here in the heart of Texas, the largest county, we stand for reform at the federal level. We know that is where the true changes can be implemented. At the same time, I'm not comfortable just saying, well, that's somebody else's problem, so I'm not going to deal with it. And
Right.
so at the county, we have the ability to respond. Part of my job is also to be the director of emergency management for Harris County. And so we're working with the Office of Emergency Management, our Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, Fire Marshal, to be ready to respond and to improve were that ever to affect our community. How to make sure that we're as prepared as we possibly can be. And our Fire Marshal is one of the authors of the sort of handbook that gets all law enforcement to collaborate in those kinds of situations. Beyond that, we're exploring what policies Harris County can actually implement. It's very ironic. The state has passed legislation that says that, you know, basically ties the county's hands. It says counties cannot regulate XYZ, you know, as it pertains to gun reform. But we're working within the confines, and I hope this week we're going to have some policies to unveil. I don't want to jump the gun before we've got them fully fleshed out, but we're putting the finishing touches on them, working with the city, and I hope we'll be able to have something this week that is pretty much as aggressive as we can get within the legal constraints, and we will always work to advocate. Ultimately, I'm responsible for the safety of the community, and this is an issue where we know we need to find a better balance.
Right. So with that in mind, how exactly does the county prepare for emergencies like the event that took place at Memorial City Mall over tax-free weekend? You know, it was a very scary event. People didn't know what was going on, didn't know what to make of it. How does the county actually prepare for those events?
You can never prepare for a specific event. You never know what exactly is going to happen. We would have never imagined we were going to have 4 major chemical fires in the span of the time I've been here. So what you have to do is make sure you can work together well. The different partners are ready to collaborate, because when when there's a disaster, by definition, right, it's not something that you can perfectly plan. So we do a lot of training, a lot of preparation drills, and building those relationships so that when the time comes, you feel comfortable working together. And I've seen that in the responses and the incidents we've had is just incredible teamwork and the ability to work together. There's room for improvement, and so we're known, across the country as a very prepared Office of Emergency Management, sort of top tier. Folks call us for support. That doesn't mean we're the best we can possibly be. So that's what I asked my team to do. We just did a gap analysis that's public after the fires. So after the fire at ITC that we had earlier this year, I asked for an independent analysis of how we can do better. 130-page report, and it's all online, and it tells us, we have got to do better on alerts, air monitors, which we knew. So all of that is coming to Commissioner's Court for us to purchase the equipment we need and do better, particularly in how we communicate with the community, because not only is it us making sure the community is safe, but the community knowing that we're keeping them safe, right? Because otherwise that anxiety is still there. So we're working to improve things like, when there's a hurricane or heavy rain, people getting automatic notifications to their phones instead of having to sign up. That's something that's in the works. We hope here, hopefully next year we can get that underway. So we're always looking at how to get better.
That's great. Thank you. So if you have any questions for Judge Hidalgo, type them into the comments, and we'll get to those in just a little bit. So we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of Hurricane Harvey. I know you said earlier there's only so much you can do to prepare, right? But how is the county preparing for any flood-like events that could potentially happen in the future?
We've been working very hard on moving projects as quickly and as efficiently as we possibly can. So we have over 200 projects that are currently underway or prepared. All of that information is on a website, harristhrives.org. And what we've done is collect exactly what the projects are. Those are all the bond projects, that folks voted for. They're on a map where the money is, right? Because we've all heard we're waiting for federal funds, we're waiting for matching funds, and then sort of where in the stage everything is, so folks can see that harristhrives.org. Part of what we did coming in is ask that question: can we do this any faster? And so within the city of Houston, the city is in charge of drainage. They're in charge of getting water from the streets into the bayous through the drains. Outside the city of Houston, that's the county's job. So outside in unincorporated areas, we're in charge of those storm sewers. And so we just a month or two ago, we sped up all of the drainage projects that the county is responsible for. So we have cut them down, cut 1 or 2 hurricane seasons. They should be done within 3 years. And that means that we invested $60 million to make sure it happened in all income areas and not just wait for federal funding, and get those done as quickly as possible. We're currently undergoing an evaluation as well, an outside group, to figure out if there's anything else we could be doing to move the projects any faster. But we are catching up to a problem that's 150 years old, that for decades hasn't seen enough investment. And so in the meantime, our work is, how can we best respond? And how can the community best help us prepare? We have miles of channel widenings and deepenings. We have detention ponds that hold hundreds of Olympic swimming pools worth of water. But while we build those, we need everybody to purchase flood insurance. That's the most important thing. And we continue to advocate. When we had the rains, in Kingwood in May, normally that many homes, around 400 homes flooded. For the federal government, that's not enough for there to be small business loans, which are very, very low interest loans, or aid. So normally that wouldn't have met the threshold. But we lobbied and we worked with other counties and with the state, and we managed to get them to consider all of the homes in the neighboring counties as well and add those together. And so we managed to get small business loans. So we're trying to advocate for them to lower those thresholds, to be ready to help residents. But the best thing people can do is to buy flood insurance, and always being aware. One thing we'll be sharing as the anniversary of Harvey comes is really a new way to think about a flood preparedness. The investments we have right now are not enough. Even the flood bond, as we understand where we need to be, where we are right now, and what we need to do to make up that gap, what is clear is we're going to need more funds. We're going to need to be smarter. We're going to need to be bolder. And so we're ready to do that. We're updating our response websites. We're figuring out exactly how we can work best with the city, how we can be smarter. And I'm really eager to share that with the community as we go along.
That's great. That's something that we've heard time and time again on this program. We've had FEMA on, we had State Senator Paul Betancourt, and last week we had Sarah Davis, and everybody just really trying to reinforce that you have to have flood insurance. That's something that we hear, but when we did have FEMA on, he shared some of the numbers for the percentage of homeowners that actually have it, and it's very low. So it's something that our realtor members, we hope they have flood insurance, but then also passing along to their clients and customers that it's essential.
It's getting higher. It's getting higher, and I'll tell you, it makes a difference. I mean, when we visited those homes in Kingwood, the folks that had flood insurance, you're up and running. Otherwise, there's this anxiety of how, we do everything we can, and so we managed to get those that federal government help, but that wasn't a given, right? I mean, initially they said sorry, and so it's very important. It's very, very important, and I want folks to know, we are truly doing everything we can, working day and night to figure out how we can work faster, how we can work smarter. We are not afraid to make tough decisions, to innovate, but it takes time because we're so far behind. 50 feet above sea level, and for too long the investment just wasn't there. So we'll continue working and keeping people posted, and what we want to do is be transparent in the process. So that's why we have this website, Harris Thrives, that really has all the information.
That's great. And thank you for sharing that. We'll put that up on the screen for people to see as well. I do want to take just a second to see if we've had any questions come in for you.
Okay.
If I can get this pulled up. All right. Looks like no questions just yet. Just a lot of people telling you good morning.
Good morning.
Magical Monday to everyone.
That's right.
That's what it says. So we'll take a look at that again in just a moment.
Sounds good.
So you mentioned the retention ponds. So how will the retention requirement changes, do you think, affect development?
So one of the things we did is new detention requirements. We had been operating under rainfall projections that were decades old. And so we know after Harvey that, before Harvey, that was the third 500-year flood, right? And so clearly we need to up the amount of rain that qualifies as a 100-year flood and a 500-year flood. The rainfall estimates were just very much off.
Right.
And so finally, the new estimates are out. Atlas 14, as soon as they became available, the county began working with those in their projections, and we're in the process of redrawing new floodplain maps. That has to go through the federal government, so it's not something we can just redraw and publish. It'll take a couple years for them to go through the sort of federal process. But in the meantime, we don't feel comfortable waiting and saying, well, we're just going to wait until, the new floodplain maps are out before we use them. And so what we've done is worked on new detention requirements for developers that make sure that as development continues, that we're not increasing the risk of flooding for folks downstream. We know that, the earth is sort of a living sponge, our prairies, and if we develop it, the water has to go somewhere. And so based on the latest science, on the smartest rainfall projections, we're asking developers to figure, okay, this is how much you would be displacing water, and to create detention ponds that detain that much water so that it's not worsening the situation for anybody downstream. It's a tough pill for folks to swallow on a sort of intellectual level for developers because it costs more. But what's been really heartening is really seeing the community come together. I mean, we worked, I know, with your organization, with the different organizations that work on development as well, talking about, how we explain these to folks so it's not sort of a confusing thing to the folks that are building. And what I was really inspired by and heartened by was folks' understanding and recognition that it is irresponsible and sort of it'd be sort of hard to accept that we would knowingly increase the risk of flooding for people. And so it's really, this is our entire community stepping up and saying, we have the latest science, we have the latest information, and we refuse to knowingly cause more flooding to our community, knowing that, of course, that hurts our property values, it hurts the attractiveness of our region, but most importantly, it hurts lives. And so that is currently, going on. We passed those detention requirements a month ago or so, and they're underway in unincorporated Harris County, and we're waiting for the city to follow suit.
Great. So along those same lines, can you tell us a little bit about Porous Pave, and do you see that as a potential flood solution despite its high cost?
So Porous Pave is one of those kind of creative ideas that we're always looking at to try and ameliorate the risk of flooding. Our soil is clay, and so if we have porous pavement, the water seeps into the clay and it becomes kind of a bit of a mess. So it requires more investment underneath the pavement so that the water can go where it needs to go. Right now, for a big development, major road, for example, it's cheaper to build a bigger drain, which is sort of the standard solution. As opposed to investing in the additional infrastructure we would need to be able to incorporate porous pave. So I know it's being incorporated by some developers and by the county in some larger parking lots, for example. But as far as large-scale roads and development, it's not at a point where it makes more sense than, from a fiscal standpoint, than the traditional solution, which would achieve the same result, maybe not as innovative, but ultimately it's the same result consult for costs that make sense. So it's something that we continue to look at, and we invite those kinds of ideas always at the Flood Control District, and I always, invite folks to reach out. I'm happy, and my office is happy to put folks in contact with our Flood Control District for people who have ideas, because this is going to take all of us. And a word that is thrown around at the county all the time now is best practices. We need to look at best practices. We can't reinvent the wheel if it's already there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do see Kelly had a question. After you complete the drainage, how long will it take for FEMA to reevaluate the zones and update the maps?
The floodplain maps, so it's two different things. The drainage projects, and that's to make sure that the water in unincorporated areas goes from the streets to the bayous and channels. That's currently underway. Depending on where it is, how far along the projects are, they'll all be done in the next 3 years. And we're moving as quickly as we can. Separately, we have the new rainfall standards, which we're using to enforce our development requirements, the building requirements, the detention requirements. So even though we don't have floodplain maps yet, we are already using that math. We're not saying let's wait until we redraw them. Now, as far as actually redrawing the floodplain maps, I believe that takes about 2 years, and that's not up to us. That is up to the federal government. There is a process, so you can't just redraw the floodplain maps and when you're a county and publish it. You have to go through a federal process. So that's going to take us 2 years. But what I've decided and we're doing in Harris County is we're not going to wait for the maps to be redrawn for us to be regulating up to the new rainfall that we know is the reality of the rainfall that falls in this place. So that's why we have to wait for the federal government. But in the meantime, we're being smart with that new science.
Yeah, very good. So a little bit lighter subject here. You talked about attracting people to the area, and is Harris County involved with any beautification, or is there anything going on related to that we should know about?
Yes, we always have projects. One thing I'm excited about is our trails. As we widen and deepen our bayous, ultimately have to take some time, because we've built right up to the bayou, and so if we want to expand it, you have to acquire right of way, which takes time. But in the process, we're making sure we put in trails. We're making sure that we make sort of kill two birds with one stone. I think it is very exciting as we move toward a future in which Harris County is a place where we're not just, and Houston are not just Bayou City, right? But it's a place you can bike, you can walk. It's beautiful. It's different. A lot of our detention basins double as parks. They double. We just unveiled some soccer fields we're building, and so it's that dual purpose of the infrastructure, the flooding infrastructure we're building, we're preserving, that will help make for a more attractive county. And those are some of the discussions we're having as we, for the first time, think long term about what we want Harris County to look like when we're deciding sort of our infrastructure dollars. Is we're in the early stages of launching that conversation, and we hope to field ideas from the public. Where do we need sort of parks and trails and bike trails and transit? How can we compete? Because a lot of people come here from places that have public transit, that have more of those trails, and they're sort of they want to see more, and we have to remain competitive. We have to remain cutting edge. We have to remain a good place to live. Number one there is, of course, being safe, and so that's why that's our top priority.
Very good, very good. That looks like all the questions we actually have from our members this morning. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Well, thank you guys for having me. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the work you guys are doing. It is so important to make our county a welcoming place, and a home is the anchor for lives and community. And so it's a beautiful thing and beautiful work that you guys do, and I truly am so grateful to you, to the development community, in working with us to make sure that we are growing smart, that we're safe, and that we're an attractive place to be. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you again so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So again, today's Member Focus Monday and this week's podcast were sponsored by Energy Ogre, the best referral you'll ever make. We'll be back next Monday at 9 a.m., same time, same place, with Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher. So we'll see you then. Have a great week.